You ask about someone who says that they pray but are not interested in the spiritual path, and therefore he feels that prayers are not answered and that no one is there or doesn't care. The problem is that you cannot pray and have no interest in the spiritual life. Prayer is precisely communication with the spiritual dimension. And so by definition, prayer is blocked because one has no real interest in the reality of God. One's life is not open to grace. One does not place as higher than oneself the reality of God. So prayer becomes its own self-fulfilling prophecy because it is speaking to the void. There needs to be a sense of dependence, a sense of being loved, a sense of loving back, a sense of devotion. All of these elements are absolutely fundamental to prayer, to this communication with the holy. Otherwise, it is so superficial that it has no potency. You ask, how can one person see God in all things and another not? In the teachings of the work, there is this term called magnetic center, which represents the fact that some people are drawn to these spiritual things and others not at all. And even Uspensky, in his intellectual genius, could not formulate why that was the case, why in the same family one might be profoundly attracted to spiritual things and others not at all. It is a mystery that could be related to all sorts of things that are beyond us, including other lives, karma, the mysteries of who we are before our birth, and why the soul comes into being. But it is also the fact that in this world, it is against all odds that we are authentically spiritual, because the world itself is one giant aggressive effort to crush that which is spiritual, to make us slaves to the material fantasy of a three-dimensional world in which there is nothing sacred. Everything reflects that mindset. And when one does come upon religion, in most cases it is so contradictory and hypocritical and superficial that it does not open the door to these deeper things, to what the soul truly hungers for. You say you don't think God would ignore prayer, especially from one trying to gain the smallest faith. So if you're suggesting that the person who prays without an interest in spiritual things is seeking that grain of faith to begin the journey, the issue is this person has to be willing to take that leap, to open the heart and mind to greater possibilities and remain open. One cannot say, well, there was no response, so I'm done, because then we shut down our capacity to receive. And what is it that establishes this capacity, this good soil? A humility that recognizes our limitations and our need and our dependence on the One, on the source of our being. What stands in the way? Pride, illusions, lack of self-mastery so that anything goes within us, no inner purification so that we can be full of negativity and dragged down into the darkest places. And the further we are dragged down, the further away we are from a connection, from a tasting of the sacred in life. We must do our part. It is true that grace can break through anything, but if we are searching for that path, hungering to move towards the heart of God, we must cleanse the inside of the cup to some degree to make room for that. If it is nothing but noise within us, then in that noise we cannot hear the still small voice. You say, if one doesn't believe from the start, why bother praying? This is true, but it reveals the instinct, the intuition that there is something more to be found, even if the mind cannot grasp in any way what that means, what that implies, what that could be. Nevertheless, something in the human spirit knows. And this is why in all cultures and all times there is this urge for the spiritual, because it is built within us, this sense of that deeper reality from which we come and to which we go, and which creates all things. You say, is there something that you can tell this person to open up to the spiritual life? Sometimes one must hit rock bottom to have a breakthrough, to be shattered enough to have an authentic humility and recognition of one's nothingness, shall we say, in the face of ultimate goodness, or one's need. Sometimes it is that crying out that begins the transformation. It cannot come from an intellectual discussion to convince the mind. It has to be an emotional knowing. And it has to transcend creeds and beliefs that oftentimes get in the way even of that intimate recognition, because so often it confuses us and it leaves us with external pictures and ideas rather than this internal reality that is life-giving. My suggestion would be to tell this person to find moments of quiet, whether in nature, at home, in a safe place where they can relax body and mind and intentionally enter into a place of silence, of settling down, so that they are not imprisoned by the noise of the mind, but rest in a silence that can generate a connection, a realization of presence and connectedness and mystery, these things that are so often unavailable to us in our more active life. Help them to get in touch with that deeper part of themselves, that purer part, which is rooted in God already, and through which there will be help from Holy Spirit. It is Holy Spirit itself that guides us towards this path of return, this path of encounter. And so, slowing down enough, quieting down enough to get in touch with the beauty of the present moment, the wonder of nature, transcending all the insanity of this world. In that space, a connection can happen that makes all things new.